weekly video roundtable discussion show where we discuss all things fire service related. Firefighting Today is a production of PeteLamb.com. And now your host, Chief Peter Lamb.
Okay, welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly broadcast. Every Sunday night, you'll see us here. We have some new folks on the panel that haven't been with us, and some old newcomers, and some new folks. So we got a good mix here tonight. We're talking about myths and misconceptions. So a couple of quick housekeeping things first. If you were watching us on YouTube, go to the YouTube channel and actually go to the live chat. If you want to go to the YouTube channel and go to the live chat, you can actually interact with us, and we'll get that. And secondarily, if you actually use something and you go at Pete Lamb on Twitter, if you do that, you will also be able to interact with the panel. So with that, let's introduce the panel. So I'm Pete Lamb, obviously, peetelamb.com. I'm your host. I also do the Firefighter Training Podcast. If you haven't taken a listen to that, please feel free to take a listen. There's a bunch of stuff. We're approaching 200 episodes online, so please feel free to check that out. So, Charlie, we're going to start with you. So, Charlie, quick introduction for the audience.
Hi, guys. My name is Charlie Hall, retired fire chief of West Warwick Fire Department, West Warwick, Rhode Island.
Thank you, Charlie. Chief Pernesti, Joe.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Pernesti. I'm an assistant chief with City of Elyria, Ohio Fire Department, Northern Ohio, just west of Cleveland. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, good to have you with us, Joe. Joe Starnes. Joe, your mic's muted.
I'm Joe Starnes. I'm project manager for Project Kill the Flashover. I'm also the PIO for Oak Grove Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you, Chief, for having me.
Good to have you, Joe. John Cagno, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Retired Battalion Chief John Cagno of Providence, Rhode Island. And thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you, John. Chief Burns, Kevin, say hello.
Hello, Chief, and everyone. Kevin Burns, retired Deputy Fire Chief with the Framingham, Massachusetts Fire Department.
Thank you, Kevin. And Lane.
Lane Woolery, Battalion Chief with San Diego City Fire Rescue.
Thank you, Lane. Always a pleasure to have you. And Chief Whitley.
This thing's slow on muting, sorry. Hi, Warren Whitley, retired assistant chief from Prince William County, Virginia, and also involved with Joe at the Kill the Flashover project.
All right, good. So let me kind of set the stage. So I'll throw out what I believe to be a misconception. So, this is not like real life Mythbusters. We don't get to like blow anything up or use torches or anything. So we're not doing Mythbusters. You think that's easy to say, don't you? But we're not doing that. But we've got some misconceptions, some pet peeves, some things that ought to be talked about. So I'm going to throw one out there, and that is the concept of interoperability. Now, that's a word. We throw it around. It's been around. I think all of us kind of associate it. It's certainly been around prior to that, but many of us associate it with, 9/11 and the things that happened and so on and so forth about interoperability. And I think that we narrow the focus. And I'll ask you guys for opinions. This is just Pete's opinion here that I'm throwing out. I think interoperability is misunderstood. I think it's often connected and talked about with radios. I think it is far beyond radios. Not that long ago, in a previous department that I worked in, we actually showed up. They asked us to, report to the front of the building with a high-rise pack and whatever, and mutual aid all the time, these two departments. And we throw the high-rise pack on, they charge the line, the coupling blows off. One of them is national standard and the other one is iron pipe. That's interoperability, right? We're worried about what radio frequency we can get on, and we're not using the same host threads in a mute. We had never done it. We had always used their host or they used my host. We had never tried to interconnect. It just never came up. And so I think that interoperability can be a misconception. It certainly is not a myth. It certainly is necessary, but I think it involves equipment. I think it involves training. I think it involves people. I think it involves a lot of things. So that's any comments on that? Please feel free to weigh in. Am I misreading that, or is that where it is? Chief Cagno, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, Chief. I think that's where it started. Its foundation was in communication. Obviously, large-scale incidents. We had poor performance or interoperability with radio communication. That's where I think the foundation was. But you're absolutely right on target in saying that it goes way beyond that. That can go for many things, from, like you say, types of hose you're using, procedural stuff that can complicate operations and so on. So yeah, it's a misconception. I think it's a much broader statement. Certainly in Rhode Island, we only addressed it as a communication issue. Not many departments took it much farther than that.
No, I agree. So I don't say that the things we're talking about here are bad words. They're not necessarily bad words, but I think that they're misconstrued in some cases. And that's one that gets thrown around the fire service pretty easily. It's got to be interoperable. And sometimes we forget the details of interoperability. Somebody else, who else got a misconception or a myth or something, a pet peeve? Who's got something that they want to throw out there? Anybody? Because I can keep us going. Go ahead. Joe Steins, you got one, and then we'll go to Joe Pernesti. I like that one, Joe. But Joe Steins, go ahead.
Steam kills first.
Say again?
Steam kills first.
Okay, so it's the whole. I'm surprised that you took the fire science path here, Joe. I really am shocked about that. But
I started to go driving, and I went that way.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So yeah, there is a lot of stuff out there, and so traditional fire science, things we were taught. And so what is the myth, Joe, that, so what you stated, well, steam kills. Steam is going to, if I operate a line, steam is going to kill the civilian. So where are you going with that? What is the truth? So if you're going to give me the myth, what's the truth?
The truth is that steam didn't kill the patient inside, the victim inside. Steam is a better alternative than what the victim is in a high release rate fuel environment.
So moisture is not a bad thing, is what you're telling me.
No, moisture is not a bad thing. If you understand air tracks, you can actually even make it better.
Okay. I think that's a pretty common one. I think that one is that one's bandied about a whole lot.
Well, one of the things reason I brought it up is I think it's one of the biggest inhibitors to people changing their methodologies to deal with high release rate fuels. I think they really believe that, and we saw it this week with a post, that if you're not inside creating steam, then the steam you create from the outside is worse than the steam you create from the inside. And that goes with the myth that you're pushing it. Well, I don't know that you're pushing anything. So,
I think that, years ago, there was a lot of discussion when you used a fog nozzle, there was high pressure, low pressure, and whether you can move a lot of air with a fog stream. I think some of that's there. And like any tool, I can really hurt myself. I can hurt my thumb pretty bad if I'm using a hammer. Proper technique and proper using the right tool for the right job, I think certainly has some merit here.
Well, I think firemen fear steam worse than they fear getting burned.
Well, yeah, I don't know as I want to go there, but yeah, I mean, you could certainly say that. But I think the myth of, steam, you know, what is the thing you keep asking me? You keep challenging me every time we get into this discussion. A lot of us here run ALS rescues and things like that. You're not picking up a lot of people out of saunas. You know?
No. No, if they die in a sauna, that usually is not because of steam.
Right, right. Anybody want to weigh in on the steam myth while Joe's got that? Yes, go ahead, Chief. Go ahead.
You know, the one thing I notice a lot in the discussion, and obviously, you know, we can talk about it later if you want, that, you know, the training that we've delivered with our agency here in the last couple of years. But the one misconception that the fire is actually producing a dry heat prior to the, you know, us putting water on it. And if you look at just, you know, going back to high school chemistry, if you look at the combustion equation, H2O is one of the big products of combustion. So the steam, the moisture is already there just from what the fire is doing through its natural process.
Right, right. Yeah, Warren, you want to, you know, put that comment out there, Warren, if you just add on, if you would.
Yeah, you're right, Lane. The fire has to work to liberate the moisture from the fuels that are going to burn first. So there's always moisture somewhere in that equation.
Yeah, yeah, right. Wet stuff doesn't burn, right? It has to dry out first, so that moisture has to be released. So I think that's valid. I think that's valid as well. Chief Pernesti, you had you had a pretty strong myth, and I saw some postings that you did. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but you were asking questions about that very subject. So throw that out. Have you got a myth there, Chief Pernesti?
That RIT works. I think that for the last 20 some years, we feel the need that we have to set up a RIT team. We have to set up a RIT team. And I think it's run its course in the fire service because I think there's a large percent of firefighters or chiefs that believe it's going to save the day. I've seen more belief that a RIT bag is going to save a firefighter than a smart commander outside being able to handle a mayday. And I also think that there's still that belief that a 3-man engine company from a mutual aid fire department is going to come in and save a firefighter in trouble. It isn't. It's the people inside. It's all the science that we're talking about here, getting water on the fire as quick as possible. And if an emergency happens, I believe we don't focus enough on two things: the firefighters inside saving that firefighter, and training our commanders in handling an emergency. Maybe not a mayday, but an emergency, in handling it. We don't do enough of that. And I think that's a big myth, that RIT has got to be set up, and I believe it has to be set up. I guess it works, or, you know, it's going to save, we set it up to save our own. I think there's a lot of other steps there that have to take place.
So, all right. So the flip of that myth is, so you're right. You gotta train the commanders. The commanders have to be proactive, watching their people, knowing what's going on, getting a sense of it, good reports, good intel reports, and so forth. The other thing, you really had a couple of them there, Chief, and it was a good statement, is how many people make a RIT team? You know what I mean? So we assign this 3-man engine company, and we say that that's a RIT team. The other one I have about RIT, which is interesting, is most of our RIT training is based upon the removal of a single downed firefighter.
Right.
If our SOPs and procedures are correct, we shouldn't be freelancing. So we should be doing RIT training to rescue a 3-person crew. And I don't believe that's being done on a regular basis at all. And now you're talking about 9 people, 10 people to try to manipulate this. I think after the Brett Tarver incident in Phoenix, I think they said something about 12 people. You know, the RIT team goes in, that's recon, somebody else maybe makes the removal, and so on and so forth, kind of the bucket brigade procedure, if you will. So I think you really got two things. Is RIT going to save you? Is that the answer? Or do we have enough people on RIT teams? I think there's really two of them there at the same time. It's interesting. I'll put in a shameless plug. Many years ago at Firehouse, I actually wrote something for Firehouse, and I delivered a program that the best way to save somebody is an intact crew. If my right leg goes through the floor, the best way I'm getting out of that building is my partners latching onto me almost instantly, because we're close enough to do that. And should I have a RIT team? Absolutely. But I think that you're right when you talk about an intact crew. Anybody want to weigh in? Chief Cagno, you had some comments on that one.
Yeah, we can actually tie all three of these things together. When you talk about RIT teams or fast companies, usually in the smaller departments, the RIT team is coming from a mutual aid department. And, when you talk about interoperability, how often do you train with them, or do you train with them in that respect? The other thing is, when you think about the manpower required to perform such a spend way too much time on the RIT venue, if you will, versus the manpower aspect of it, and what it actually requires in performing that in a drill format. I think we're too hung up on the comfort level of a RIT team, when we could probably be doing more justice in the fire service if we do more training on avoiding no way out situations, avoiding the problem altogether. So, do we train with our mutual aid departments, as far as a fast company, if that's where your fast company is coming from? And are they compatible with your department? Do they have thermal imaging cameras available to them? Things like that. So, we can actually loop all three. And then the whole fire behavior problem, it all goes together.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Anybody else want to weigh in on that RIT team issue before we change? Yeah, Charlie, go ahead. Charlie, jump in.
I'd like to make 3 points, Chief, if I may. Firstly, we have RIT companies in place because of NFPA 1500. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a very good thing, and I'm glad we do have that requirement. Secondly, I think it's a grievous error on the part of an incident commander to have a mutual aid company assigned as a RIT company. Who is more familiar with their buildings in their jurisdiction than the companies that were there? The department that I was chief of, our SOG, was that the fourth engine company in was the RIT company, and they stayed as the RIT company no matter how many mutual aid companies came in to assist us. That town engine company remained as the RIT company, and I'm going to tag on to the end of it, whether they liked it or not. And the third point I'd like to make is, I forget who said it about the interior firefighters are going to affect the down firefighter rescue. It's my opinion that one of the most effective RIT techniques is to continue to put the fire out.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. When you get a mayday and somebody says we're going to dump the building, maybe it's appropriate if it's collapsing, but if it's not collapsing, that's not going to help you. That's going to increase fire intensity. So I think you're on point there, Chief. I agree with that. I would just, coming from a smaller department, I get your point about the in-town company being the RIT. I get it. But I got to tell you, we just couldn't field our own RIT team. And I think as you look across America, it's not a question for Lane. He's got enough company and resources. Warren had certainly companies and resources, probably Kevin did. But from a small department perspective, it probably is going to be a mutual aid company. But I certainly agree with you, Charlie. The guy or gal that's got the best knowledge is your own personnel. And they know your breathing apparatus. They know the member. They know all of that stuff. So I think that there's some merit for that. Lane, you want to dive in?
Yeah, because of our boundary drops and the way the city's structured, we do run with automatic aid companies at the borders of the city. And our policy is to have the host agency provide the RIC company when possible. So it's preferred, but it's not absolute.
Okay.
And the other thing is that, yeah, in terms of it being, it really is a RIC operation is a bottom to top operation. You know, we were able to deliver the IFF Fireground Survival Curriculum to our personnel. We got a grant for that and rolled that material out, and you know, that sort of thing, or you know, smoke diver program, any of that stuff really goes a long way towards helping the individual firefighter that's in trouble survive. We have a in the check post or in the command post. So when a mayday does occur, we've got a set of activities to perform at the command post. One of those which is ordering an additional alarm automatically.
Right, right. Good. We got a comment from a viewer out in the YouTube chat. It seems like a plant. I don't know. It's not a plant, but it seems like a plant. We have an Ethan Bansek out in the live chat out there, and Ethan is agreeing with Chief Pernesti, saying Project Mayday shows 80% of firefighters being rescued have been rescued by someone other than a RIT situation. So as we know, Ethan is, I'm teasing him, but a great student of the trade, and he's looked at Project Mayday. That's the project being done by Don Abbott. And the statistic is almost 80% of firefighters being rescued have been by someone other than a rapid intervention crew. So that's an interesting statistic, and I think it carries on. So good stuff. Good stuff. All right, who's got another one? Who's got another myth or misconception? Anybody got a myth or a misconception? Yes, Kevin, go ahead.
Chief, I'll throw one out there, and it's coming from the full-time paid career fire department side, which is my side, that I think there's an arrogance on our side of the business that we think that we full-time paid career firemen are better than volunteers. And I think there's an arrogance there. There's a danger to that. The volunteer side of our business does great work. And I just hate to see that arrogance when it pops up.
Yeah, I think it's been around for a long time, Kevin. Well said. I mean, it's, you know, they've had, well, Warren, you must have dealt with some of this, actually. If you'd like to weigh in on some of this, there's always been the issues of two-hatters, career folks working in a volunteer department system. There's a lot of differences. When I was a young volunteer in a very small, you know, I was the first paid guy in an all-volunteer company, and there was certainly a difference. There was certainly an air from neighboring departments that, you know, you were something less than a career firefighter. And in some cases, now, to be fair on that, and I agree with you, Kevin, but to be fair, across the country, training standards then, certainly in my era, are not what they are today. And I think that, you know, there may be an experience differential, although that's even questionable, because a young volunteer that's dedicated will be at every working fire his department has. He'll be at every working fire. And as you know, on a shift system, you're on 1 out of 3 times or 1 out of 4 times. So it is clearly interesting. And I think that there is, you know, I don't know if they're rightfully, wrongfully, deservedly so, but I think you're competent. I think your comment about there being, you know, a misconception, I think that's true. Anybody else want to dive in on that one? Anybody else want to? Yeah, Warren, go ahead. We haven't heard from you. Go ahead, and then I'll go to John.
Yeah, I mean, my department was a large combination system, and generally we'd occasionally have those flare-ups, but it seemed that more so at the senior level was the mistrust. The guys on the street, especially the volunteers that hang around and ride with the career guys, you know, they got over that hump once each party demonstrated to the other that they kind of had a clue as to what was going on, and everybody was willing to listen to whoever was in charge. So, you know, for the most part on the street, it worked fine.
Yeah. Okay. Good one. Chief Cagno, did you want to weigh in on that?
I was just going to add that there are some incredible volunteer organizations out there that are extremely busy, extremely well trained and equipped. First one to come to mind is Kentland, Maryland. A classic example of a extremely busy. They do a lot of work, and as far as their training regimen, consistent. So I agree with Chief Burns. There seems to be sometimes an arrogance within the paid firefighting systems. But I think it's changing. It isn't as bad as it was, Pete, like when we were younger, certainly. But it's still there. It still exists.
Yeah, I think so. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? Charlie, you had a myth or a misconception earlier. I don't know if you want to plug that in now.
Sure. The misconception that I have and the myth that you always have to put the wet stuff on the red stuff. How many times, I'll fill this out to the panel and to the listening audience, how many times have you seen a ladder pipe being directed into a roof vent hole, or a fire confined to the front two rooms of a house and it's hit from the straight rather than taking the lines into the back and pushing it out the front? Fire is lazy by nature. It doesn't want to go or it doesn't have to go. And I saw too many times fires being pushed back through vent holes, back through, when it's blown through windows, fires being pushed back through uninvolved rooms in the house. Our exposures are not just on the A, B, and C and D side of the structure, but they're also interior exposures, room to room and floor to floor. And I've seen a lot of errors in a lot of departments doing that, and I tried to discourage that whenever I was either a company officer or in command of a fire. If the fire wants to come out, let it. Push it out from behind and give it a hand.
Well, yeah, and that's fine. That's why we've got a diversity of opinion. I think that you might have a discussion from Joe and Warren on that based on what the current science is telling us. But I think and it's very funny. This is long before you arrived there, Charlie. But I was having a conversation offline with Joe, and I talked about being a young callman in the department there, and being inside when the ladder pipe was sent down on top of me. I had that happen more than once, which doesn't mean I'm exceptionally smart. So that's there. But I think, Charlie, what's happening today, Warren or Joe, do you want to talk about that? I think Charlie's talking about it, but I think that what we're learning today might be different than that. Joe, you want to field that?
Well, what I would say to anybody is that we have our own theory of fire suppression. We have our own way we think it goes out. I'm like Warren said in the chat room, I don't think a stream in the vent hole is an effective stream. I'm not sure it has anything to do with it pushing fire. I have no evidence, for instance, that any stream pushes fire, because out in front of that stream is moisture. Now you can get gases moved and you can have a flash fire, but if you don't develop an air tract, you're not going to continue combustion somewhere else. And that's just science. That's not got anything to do with what our experiential data tells us. And I know that's not going to go over well, but that's the way that everything pans out. If you push, you're not going in the front door or the back door, or going to the side door is more of a selection of how you're going to address that fire growth than it is whether or not you hit it from the outside. If I put a stream in from the outside and I kill the flaming, why wouldn't I want to kill the flaming? Flaming is the high growth side of the fire event. It will not have a high growth side unless now I've got to go in where the physics are taking place and take a beating that my gear is not designed to take. I don't think so. I think all that's just stuff that we've raised up telling stories of slaying the dragon. That's just Joe. Warren, help me out here, buddy.
Well, we've shown, and UL and NIST have shown that you really don't push fire. You might push the pockets of gases that are going to burn off, but as Joe said, if there's no new air track to sustain any of that combustion, it's not going to happen. It's going to go out. It may look like you pushed it, but there's really no effect. Now, if there was another opening towards where you're pushing that new air track to form, then yeah, you're going to develop new combustion down that air track into other rooms.
Yeah, and I think that's it, Warren. The issue is where we provide the air to the fire so the fire can grow. It's not whether we're pushing it with a stream. It's how we provide combustion air to that fire. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, all right. But I'm still going back to Charlie's point. I think Charlie grew up in a time and grew up in an era, as many of us did. And this debate that we're having here on the Kill the Flashover show, I mean, on the Firefighting Today show, this debate is going on nationally. Charlie's comment represents something nationally that I think is out there. So when we that's the perfect segue. Charlie, you put the ball right on the tee here for a perfect segue. And I want to preface this, that when you talk about myths, and a lot of the debate on the fire service today at the national level involves these very things, the science, the all kinds of stuff. And so social media says to me, this is social media, and I'm trying to tell you that I'm actually looking on my phone here. I'm trying to censor this as best that I can. And the quote is, most fire departments around the nation no longer fight fire from the inside. That's the quote.
And I'll ask why.
We're not even there, Charlie. I don't even think that's a true statement. That's what I'm telling you. Warren,
I certainly hope it's not a true statement, Chief.
Well, and so to my point, someone has taken some information and said, and then we're going to go to the part two of that is they have taken a much safer approach and stick nozzles through windows, knocking the fire down that way. That's what's killing citizens. So I believe we have two myths there. Charlie, I know your department went in. I chief of department, my department went. I can just run the panel here. I don't know. San Diego, you still going in buildings? Is that something foreign to you that you don't go in buildings anymore there, Lane?
Oh, no, that's very much part of our doctrine. We still, we're in the West Coast, so we're still cutting a hole in the roof.
I say good.
Yeah. But I guess I bring that up because a lot of things. I don't know how we can make statements like that. I don't think that's a true statement. We said most fire departments in America. Most fire departments in America are not going inside. I'm not there. I'm not there. And if there's a panel member that is there, I don't think we have any evidence of that statement. Quite
Chief, I would add, show me one that's not going inside.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. It would be probably easy. Yeah, let's not count the ones that are going in. Let's count the ones that aren't. And I think the number is probably pretty low. But those are the kinds of things. And we have a fire service, and it's funny. We're conflict based, right? We're looking for a fight. When I read those statements, I thought it was inflammatory, quite frankly. I was, I thought I was a little insulted that because I don't know of people that are staying out. Chief Cagno, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, to go on what you're saying, Chief, besides it being inflammatory, where's the statistical data to even come up with such a statement? Obviously, this is somebody who's egotistical or maybe has fragile ego syndrome or something like that. But certainly, you don't make a comment like that without having the proof to back it up.
Yeah, well, just, disclaimer here. I'm the host of it. We're not going to talk about people's personalities. They have a right to say that. Anybody can say what they want to say. I'm not going to talk about, having, what the cause of why they said it is. That's not my gig. But I think that statements like that in my mind, in Pete Lamb's mind, that statement is a myth on its face. I mean, that's just what I'm thinking. Anybody else got something on that issue or, and again, I'm not going to engage. You notice I'm very careful. I didn't talk about the department. I didn't talk about the individual. That's not what I'm going to do, because that's not why we're here. We're here talking about myths and misconceptions. And I think that that's one of them. So I got Lane, hold on, and Chief Pernesta, you're up.
But it just drives me a little crazy here that here's a myth. We never put water from the outside ever until the last couple of years. I have lots of houses that have porches, and there's been a lot of fires where the fire's been blowing out the front windows. We've knocked it down, and then we go in. I think that there's a whole era of firefighters now that just think, well, if you're shooting water from the yard, you're not aggressive, or you're a coward, or whatever. We've been putting water on the outside, and it's no different. We just now have some science, and the way things progress to kind of prove some things. But we've always done the same things. I think anyway. We hit it. If we can go in, we go in. Just hate that. I hate that whole the whole talk of that, and well, you're not aggressive, or you're this or that. We've been doing the same type of firefighting for 100 years. We just have science to make us smarter, or to have more up here.
Yeah, no, well said, Chief. Well said. I'm going to take Lane's comment, and then Kevin, I'm going to go back to you. We're going to have a little conversation about Boston and rear porches, and talk about how that's handled, because you know that as well as anybody. So, Lane, what do you got, Chief?
Well, I'm just thinking of what I was taught, 20 some odd years ago, and the way we operated and the way we now operate today. And we really did place a premium of attacking the fire from the unburned side, to the point where we would drag lines past the fire to get in through a side door. And that we'd drag lines right up past the, through maybe even kind of an awkward stretch, and allow that fire to burn for a minute or two longer, because we didn't want to hit the fire right there in the attached garage for fear of pushing the fire into the building. Well, now we've moved on from that and actually had a lot of good results. As far as putting a line down the hole, again, like I said, cutting the hole is a big part of our corporate culture, and just that's always been just verboten, and nobody's ever really done that. It's something that.
Yeah, I think like I said, I've seen it done. It's not something that I ever ordered or what have you, but you're exactly right. I'm sitting in an office here full of bookshelves, and I bet you that there's 15 books I could lay my hands on that say attack from the unburned side, go around, push it out. There's no less than 15 books over on the shelf. We'll have to ask Ethan about that. He's probably got 15 books right now that have that quote in it, go from the unburned side. Exactly what Charlie was taught and exactly what Charlie expressed. So I think that when we change, we're not really good at change. We're not really good at change. I did want to ask Kevin about this, fires in Boston, and I'm not a Boston fireman. I certainly am not their spokesman, but if they've got a 3-deck or a 3-story wood frame with rear porches going, it is not uncommon for a 2.5-inch line to be sweeping those porches and knocking down that overlapping fire. Kevin, would you concur with that?
Yes, absolutely, Chief. And I've done that myself. A lot of fire, it's getting away from you. One of the key tactics, trying to keep it out of the attic. it's done all the time. And as I said in the chat room, Chicago Fire, that famous expression, give that fire a dash. And we've been doing it for a long time. You know, if it's a wastebasket on the back porch, we're probably not going to do that. But if you've got even one rear porch going good, there's nothing wrong with putting some water on that fire, taking the energy out of it, and then getting that line inside and mopping up. I think everyone agrees that the fire has to be put out from the inside, but to take the energy out of it, a big fire like that, no issue at all.
Right, right. Thank you for that. Chief Whitley, do you have any myths or misconceptions that you would like to talk about? No?
Come back to me in a minute. I'm thinking.
You're thinking. Okay. I'm just a tad frightened about that, but okay, I'll go with it. So on Twitter, we do have somebody on Twitter. You have KTF Burns, the deputy chief of KTF Burns. Andy is put out a tweet linking to the show. So we thank you for that. You can see that up on the screen. We can take the Twitter feed right in. So I appreciate that, Andy. Thank you for joining us, or at least being there in spirit anyway. So I appreciate that. What else we got? Chief Burns, let's go back to you.
I had one, and I was hoping Andy might be on the panel, but I'll have Chief Whitley and Chief Steins pinch hit for him. Chief, one of the things Andy's taught me relative to thermal imaging cameras, that and this is a myth or a misconception, that the spot temperature, as shown on the tick, is a reliable indicator of the overall temperature of the space. And it not only is not, it's dangerous to look at that. Let's say it's a 12-inch square maybe that's showing a couple 300 degrees. And Andy wants us to look at the overall palette, which may indicate 500 degrees or more. So for the audience, I thought I'd throw that out. Don't get too caught up in that spot temperature on your tick. Look at the overall palette. Maybe Andy will comment via social media.
Yeah, Andy, if you wanted to chime in on that, there's a little bit of a delay, obviously, but if you did want to dive in, you could feel free to do that. So, couple of Warren's go on. Charlie, you were up, weren't you? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to throw out, I think one thing that we might be forgetting here is we're talking about incident dependency. Whatever we're faced with when we first get there, we can't say that all the time this method is correct or all the time the other method's incorrect. Everything is incident dependent. It's a different game every time we roll out, and we have to adjust our rules to the game that's presented to us. And I think that gets forgotten a lot of times, particularly on the panel. Like tonight, we're talking about interior versus exterior, offensive versus defensive. Everything carries incident dependency with it, and every fire is different.
Yeah, no, I think, you want to talk about misconceptions and myths, Charlie. I think always and never. The word always and the word never are two myths in the fire service.
Should be excluded from fire ministerial vocabulary.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that you're right. I mean, you do what you need to do. If you've got a two-man company, you do what you need to do with that two-man company to try to affect something that's going to make a difference here for sure. Absolutely. So well said. Well said. Chief Whitley, are you up?
All right. I actually have two. I'll throw them out there. One is that there's one post stream that will always work for you. So then you can bring in the smoothbore mafia versus fog. And like Charlie just said, it depends. Neither one is the absolute right tool for the job on every job you go on. The other one is just because it's in a book doesn't mean it's correct.
Oh, wow. Wow, there's a big grenade. We're tossing out the big guns now. That's like me just reading you something off the internet, right? I saw it on the internet. It's got to be true. What are you kidding? It has to be. So, yeah, I mean, here's the other thing. you know, it's one of my pet peeves. Actually, Ethan and I used to do a book thing as part of my podcast. We did this little book thing, and I don't know if some of you actually know this. I use this as an example all the time, and I won't belabor this, but it's exactly to your point. So there is a book called Strategic Concepts in Firefighting. It's an older book. It's got a lot of tactical problems in it, kind of thing, or whatever. And one of the questions was, in this particular scenario, why should you not wear an air pack? That's a question to one of the tactical problems. And the answer is, it's a high bay garage. The stuff is way over your head. It takes time to don them, and you don't really need them anyway. So when that is a true statement. I can probably find it before we get off that's almost a direct quote. Now, that becomes very important when you look at Chief McAniff, if that's the way you pronounce his name. He got on the job in, I want to say, and I'll screw this up for sure, he got on the job in 36 and retired in 59. So it's published in a book based on his experience level at the time. It's a great book. I mean, there's a lot of tactical problems in there that are good. But the fact is, you know, who's the author? What's their experience level? Listen, there's a very, very famous author, known very well to all of us. I mean, you want to talk about the whole unburned side thing, you know? We've been around talking about that stuff. And so it was pretty common. Chief Cagno, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just want to go down a different path. We talked about older appliances and older devices. We have a tendency to always be using what's current, what's new. When there's times we can go back to older pieces of equipment that are still applicable today, like stellar nozzles and distributors and piercing applicators. Charlie mentioned about particular operations demand particular type of tactics. We often forget about them types of devices when we can certainly use them today. So, you know, to go along with about operations that are dependent on the situation, sometimes I think we should go back to older devices. So it's because it's old, you can't use it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. That some of the stuff. Now, if anybody's got a real good use for a 2.5-inch hose boot, you know, a Cooper hose jacket, let me know, because I just throwing it out there. But you know, distributor nozzles, things like that. You know, years and years ago, piercing nozzles were a big deal. They went out of favor. And piercing nozzles are now coming back in some form or another, or what have you. So I think that's a great example of something that, you know, what is old is new again. And I think that's a good one. Yes, Lane, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute there. Okay. Yeah, you know, to your point on the distributors and then like the fog nail and those different things, that the data that can be coming out of those basement fire burns that just happened in Delaware County here the last couple of weeks. That's some fairly compelling data. You know, just some of the early stuff I've heard is that that could be some useful information.
Yeah, and you know what, and we get into these discussions philosophically. You gotta, you know, don't read one piece of information, suck it all in, right? I talk about on the podcast, I talk about a friend of mine who says, you know, I know you read the chapter, you should have finished the book. You know, we pick pieces of what we like and what we don't like, and we're very traditional about that, and we pick what we need to do. So I think I think it's well said. I think we got to look at the data, and again, to quote my friend Joe Starnes here, in the quote is, you know, we're trying to outsmart physics, or we're trying to outrace physics. This is a chemical process here. This is, you know, there is a way, there is some rules that have to apply at some level. So, and again, you know, some of our, I saw in the chat room, I don't know where it is now, but, you know, we used the term, and it probably came after my quote, that, you know, the aggressive firefighter. There is a film on Dave Stadler today that just made my hair curl. It's a pretty heavily involved car in a garage attached, and there is fire, you know, extending up the back wall, coming across the roof section of the garage, and there are lines being pulled. There are what appears to be either 2-inch or 1.75-inch lines in the driveway, and a firefighter walks in standing up with a pressurized water extinguisher. Don't give me a lesson on science. Don't give me a lesson on any of this. I mean, I just, sometimes I don't know why we do what we do. And it's kind of it kind of makes me scratch my head sometimes. Let's do one more, and then let's be prepared for putting the ribbons on this. Let's get a summary statement after this, but we probably have time for one more topic if somebody's got one. Chief Pernesti, I'm trying to follow the chat room. Did you have something in there that we need to chat about?
Well, I guess I'll go with this one as far as a myth, and there was a few in the chat, but I'll say this, that you have to be a older officer to be a leader, and I don't necessarily, that's a myth to me. I think firefighters of any rank and even of experience can be a leader. My department has 3 new people coming in the door tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and I'm on duty tomorrow, and I have a firefighter on my shift that has less than a year on. That firefighter can be a mentor, can be a leader to these 3 kids that are coming in on the door at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I think that's a myth, that you have to be this old salt to be a leader. There's a place, and definitely I work on my leadership every day, but I don't necessarily think that you have to be on 30 years to be a leader. I see a lot of bad leaders with that many years on too.
Oh yes, no question, no question. This is a very sensitive one for me. Someone asked me my opinion last week, and I was a fool enough to give it to them, and so now I'm like, you know, the squad is out to hit me. I think some guy named Vito is going to call me or something because I offered my opinion. I agree that you can lead at any level, but I guess what I would tell you is one of the things that we've done, and you know, we could get off. The term leadership might in fact be a misconception in some places. It's being thrown around pretty commonly. And I just think that in a paramilitary organization, while anyone can lead at any time, if a platoon goes into combat and an 18-year-old Marine is the last guy standing, he's in charge. I get it. There's no question. I get it. That happens daily, unfortunately, and it's a problem. But I think that when if these 3 young people go into your department tomorrow, Chief, don't ask them to take charge. Don't have them call the overtime. Don't have them order equipment. You know, they should be trained how to follow, and then we can create a leader who knows how to follow. And while the blanket statement, everyone can lead in any position, I get it. I understand that. But I think the fire service has made some errors, and that's kind of the essence of my comment was you need to be careful. I think young recruit firefighters need to start in a position where they need to figure out where they are. Now, will one of those shine and will one of those rise to the top, one of those 3 young men? Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. But I think that what our job and what our responsibility is to get them a good foundation where they need to know how to follow, and then they can probably lead. Chief Lamb will now step down from his soapbox. So I apologize for that, but it's what I do. So let's start putting the summary statements. Warren, what do you want folks to? So we talked a lot about myths, misconceptions. We offered our points of view. What's the takeaway from someone watching this episode? What can they learn?
Well, I'll reiterate something you said: is don't believe everything you see, read, or hear. Go out and get as many sources of information you can to make your own conclusion about whatever the subject is. Because I can guarantee you most of the books, at least in the fire service, are not peer reviewed, and it boils down to that person's unique experience and or opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. Don't believe everything you hear. You know, we should take, here's a summary statement from me, and I'll go down the line. Lane, you're up next, and then Kevin. But, you know, here's the summary statement. Why don't you treat information like a hazmat? You better get 3 to 5 sources and verify before you start taking it. It's like a hazmat scene where you're checking references that long. So, Lane, what do you want to say to somebody watching this thing a little bit later on? A lot of comments, lots of opinions, myths and misconceptions. What's the takeaway from you?
You know, I would say that safety is not a zero-sum game. If there's a presumption that making the fire ground safer for us comes at the expense of the citizen, and that, you know, in terms of transitional attack and those sorts of things, and that's just not the case.
Okay, good. Chief Burns, what do you got?
Chief, I'll just end with a myth and just a quick statement. I saw it today on social media, and it's about dirty turnout gear being a badge of honor. That's certainly a myth. And I saw something today that it really struck me. It said, the worst thing about cancer isn't what it does to you, but what it does to the people you love. And boy, I thought that was a powerful statement to have us all maybe change something, change the way we're doing something to prevent cancer.
Yeah, well said, Chief. Well said. Good takeaway. Chief Cagno, what's your takeaway for the listeners and the viewers?
We need to be open-minded so we can avoid the myths and misconceptions overall. We need to be favorable to change and be open-minded.
Good. Joe Starnes, what do you got? What's the summary statement from Joe Starnes?
Well, let's see if I can do something non-controversial. I think the big difference in our discussion is simply the impact of high release rate fuels. I think that's what we're not saying. We're not saying that the old tactics are not good or bad tactics. It's that when you deal with high release rate fuels, the physics of that is different than the physics of straw, horsehair, and leather. And those physics is why this conversation is taking place. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if it wasn't for that. We're getting flashovers 15 times faster than we were in the 70s. In the 70s. And so the high release rate fuels is the question of science that we're applying here. If you don't deal with that, if you don't control the air, it will provide its own air. It has the ability to do that in physics. And so what we need to understand is that we're dealing with a different set of formulas, not formulas, but different set of components into formulas than we did years ago when we were trained. The only reason I'm on in this conversation is 2 reasons. One, I spent 20 years telling people the wrong way. And secondly, I got a son that somebody's going to order inside a building tomorrow night. And I don't think that I should sit silently when I think it's differently, and I have empirical data that says it's different. So I apologize if I'm rude or if I'm overbearing and too passionate, but I do tell you that tactics are generated on experience, not on science. We're now trying to learn to put tactical data together with science, and we don't know how. We don't even know how to have a conversation because we want to talk about the way we did it and the way it happened. And I do agree that all fires are contextual and everything deals on context. and that includes air and fuel. So that's my take, Chief. Thank you for the opportunity. Good night.
All right. Thanks. Chief Pernesti.
I agree with Joe Starnes, but I'll say this. You got to know the science, but your tactics, we take it to a military analogy. I still want a leader in the field that has experience, but I want that leader to take in the science and the new data. But I want that guy to have some experience, and I think that while we base off of tactics and not science, tactics that are proven and work. But regardless, I want a leader and a commander that has the experience and the knowledge to quickly go through his Rolodex and his or her brain to pick the right action, to include what Kill the Flashover is doing as many of the tools. I hate saying tools in the toolbox, but that's where we got to be. And you're never going to have a one-size-fits-all type, but I want to work for a leader that puts everything together, modern, and be able to put a cellar nozzle in service. I want to work for that guy.
All right, well said. Last and certainly not least, Charlie, what do you got? What do you want a listener to take away from tonight's discussion? We had a pretty good discussion, pretty lively discussion tonight. Charlie, what do you want to leave the listeners?
The science of the job has changed so much in my career, spanning a little over 40 years. The changes I've seen in the science of the job, the attention to safety, the improvements in equipment, the advent of ICS, one of the most critical and one of the most important things I've seen in my career, ICS. It has changed the way we do our job, but the end game is still the same, and I'll say it, and I'll be the dinosaur saying it from the Stone Age. You still have to get in and put the fire out. No ifs, ands, or buts. The science and how you do it, again, I'll stress what I said 10 minutes ago. It's all incident dependent. It's not one size fits all. Every fire has to be custom measured, and you have to create the fabric to fit it, and it's going to fit that fire by itself. People say, gee, are all fires the same? Every single fire is different. Every fire is different, and you have to approach it that way.
All right, well said. All right, well, thank you guys. I thought we had a good panel tonight, good discussion. I like when there's diversity on the panel. It helps. It makes it a little more interesting and watchable. I think that's a good thing for the viewers. We will be back here next week. Topic to be announced. We'll put the announcement out, but we will be back here next week in some fashion. And if anybody's got suggestions that they'd like to see on the panel, any of our viewers or whatever, send an email. We're happy to take your input. So with that, let's just close it out here. All right.